It's more of like what sounds good in the appropriate context. And I think you can make anything sound good if given the right context.
What's good, everybody? Welcome back to Love Music More. I am Scoobert Dubert, about to hop on with Levi McClain. Levi, I think I found him on Instagram or was it YouTube? And he's this incredible music theorist, composer, educator, and he deals with one of the most interesting topics to me, and one that I haven't explored a ton as a musician or as a music theorist myself. But that's dividing up the octave to more than 12 notes. Like, we kind of take it for granted. There's 12 notes. I think that was how I started this whole podcast, was a podcast on why are there 12 notes? And Levi took it a step further and said, yeah, why? Let me do something different. And so he composes often in 31 note octaves. And so you talk about what is an octave, how does this all work, how do you start dividing it, and what does that music sound and feel like? And there's some really interesting kind of colors and emotions that are able to come out of this world that at first there's parts of it that feels like it's out of tune, but then as you settle into listening to this kind of music, you realize that it keeps going back to that same notes, and you start to kind of sink into it. It's really wonderful and different and alien and challenging and emotional, and it was a great conversation, and I'm so excited to share it with you because I think it opened my mind. I think it'll open some of yours. Before I do, I'd like to introduce our title sponsor, DistroKid. DistroKid makes music distribution fun and easy with 100% unlimited uploads, and artists get to keep 100% of royalties and earnings. And we've got 30% for you if you sign up through our code, distrokid.com/VIP/lovemusicmore. 1 million plus artists rely on DistroKid to get their music onto Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, TikTok, Tidal, Instagram, and all of the major streaming services. I love it because you got the DistroKid app, and it is now available on iOS and Android. So go to the app or Play Store to download it and get started and enjoy this conversation. What's good, everybody? Welcome back to Love Music More. I am Scoobert Dubert, and I am joined with special guest Levi McClain. Welcome to the show.
Hey, man, what's going on?
Just super excited to dig deep about music and harmony, and I want to open some people's minds with this episode. So just to give them a little bit about what you do and kind of the perspective of your YouTube channel, which is where I found you, could you give a brief overview of what you've been working on, what you've been telling people, and maybe how you ended up talking about these concepts?
Yeah, for sure. So I have a music theory YouTube channel. We discuss topics about music theory in general, but specifically what I'm interested in is microtonal harmony, and specifically what happens if we, instead of dividing an octave into 12 equally distant notes, what happens if we divide them into 31 equally distant notes? And then how does that bend the fabric of harmony itself? And then how does that give us new tools as composers and as musicians and as sound designers to, express ourselves in a deeper way?
Love it. And it's so fun to think about painting or colors, where it's okay, you only have 12 colors. It's okay, I could do a lot with 12 colors, but now I'll want to start blending colors and go, oh, is that the same color? Is that the same green or the same blue? And you're starting to blend them together. So I like hearing the way that you've been putting these concepts. Is, as a guitarist, I think a lot about this too, because I'm oftentimes playing slightly out of tune or intentionally bending or doing something in between the spaces, or a lot of great bassists that play fretless, and the ways that they can kind of just distort that sense of time and place by choosing exactly where to place their notes. Those that are really good at it, those that aren't,
right. Right. Yeah, I think there's definitely a lot to that, and I think it's something in there that you mentioned is really important, which is that we usually think of microtonality as being something that's usually distinctly outside of the West. So whether it's Iraqi maqams or kind of Indonesian gamelan, we expect microtones in that area, but we don't really think of microtones being a part of kind of the Western harmonic tradition. But it absolutely is, what you mentioned with bends. When you're bending, you're going into some microtonal territory, and it's a huge part of our tradition that isn't systematized in the way that we think about it. Like we usually think about music theory on in terms of like a piano keyboard. That's one of the easiest ways to visualize it. But the truth of the matter is that in all kinds of music, we're always hitting kind of the notes in between the notes.
Absolutely. And just as a vocalist, I'm never perfectly in tune. And when I make myself perfectly in tune using technology, it sounds a little weird to me, you know?
Yeah, absolutely, definitely. You can play with that with like just intonation as well, which is kind of like we can kind of instead of pushing it on one end, we could push it on the other and get like so perfectly in tune that it almost sounds like uncanny valley.
Yeah.
That's something that's like I think I usually think of these things in terms of tools. Like it's not is this something that sounds good? Is it something that sounds bad? It's more of like what sounds good in the appropriate context. And I think you can make anything sound good if given the right context.
That's a beautiful way to put it. I'm also curious, maybe we start with the octave, you
Sure.
know? So people probably know like there's an A note or there's a C note, and then it happens again, and it happens lower, it happens higher, and somehow it feels like the same note. Maybe we start there and just explain like why is a C note, and then why are we talking about the divisions between C to C or A to A?
So you can
Sure.
think of it in terms of frequencies. So
Okay.
so you have like A, which is usually described as like, oh, A440. That's going to be your A kind of in the middle of the keyboard. That's what most of music is tuned to, is A440. Now, if you go an octave lower, essentially what you're doing is you're dividing that frequency in half. So if you have that A note in the middle of the keyboard, and then you go an octave lower, it means you're doing 220, divided by 2. So you get A at 110 hertz, right? And then you can do it the opposite way. If you're going the octave up, you multiply by 2. So that A440 becomes A880. And so that's like kind of like the more scientific physics stuff that's happening is your brain is really, really good at essentially doing ear math,
Okay.
to be able to tell the difference between certain frequencies. And when something sounds like a perfect octave, when it locks in, that's your brain telling itself and registering that like, oh, this is the same note at a frequency either double or half of its given value, essentially. So that's what's happening with octaves, and it happens also not just with octaves but with every interval. Like a fifth is going to have a very specific relation, numeric relation back to that fundamental, that first A440, or whatever note you choose to start with. And these relationships exist with every interval, and your brain is just really, really good at being able to identify those.
I love that. And it's so interesting too that like I'm still with you there, right?
Yeah, sure.
The 1-to-2 ratio, like I even think there would be alien species that would be using the octave in their music.
Mm-hmm.
The part that I think we start, or that people that are into microtonality maybe diverge from the rest, is saying, oh, therefore the 2-to-3 ratio, and then the 4-to-5 ratio, and then the 16-to-9 ratio, like the idea of all of the other intervals somehow being holy or sacrosanct, like.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the fifth, maybe the
Mm-hmm.
fourth, and those are the reason why we call them perfect. But then the other ones, it's I feel like the math starts to get a little fudgy, and it kind of feels like heliocentricity, like trying to be like, okay, everything revolves around the Earth, so we're gonna have to fudge the math a lot to make things kind of look like they, revolve around the Earth. And you go, actually, no, it revolves around the sun, and now look, the math is elegant.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And there's there's a lot of different ways to think about it, and to think of music in terms of like, okay, the best music, the music that sounds the greatest is that's going to be mathematically simple, right? And
Right.
so this is a principle that a music theorist called Norman Kasdan kind of talked about a lot, and he called it the natural law theory, which is that simple harmonic ratios, like your 5-to-4, your 3-to-2, your 2-to-1. Those are simple mathematically and harmonically, so they're going to sound good to the ear. And what we find is that music that tends to hit those harmonic intervals that are relatively simple, we find that correlates with pleasing sounds, what people would describe as pleasing sounds, right? Yeah. And then when we do things like a minor second's got this like a little bit more scraggly kind of number, right. And it's like, oh, okay, that explains it. But what we find is that explains Western music very well. That explains the practice of 18th century harmony very well. And this is an idea that you can even trace back to the Greeks, and Pythagoras, and then even before that in Mesopotamia. There's this idea that the natural law, so to speak, dictates what sounds good.
Yeah.
But if going back again to the Greeks, we have people like Aristoxenus who came up with this Aristoxenean theory, which is that what sounds good is extremely culturally dependent. It's more of like, what kind of sounds are you used to hearing, and then those sounds are going to be the sounds that are rated the most pleasing. So if you step outside of the West and you go to like Indonesian gamelan is usually the favorite example. It's like those harmonic intervals that they're messing with, don't have nice math at all, right? They're usually quasi pentatonic or quasi 7-note equal, but when you actually like identify harmonic ratios between them, it's a little bit scraggly. But it doesn't mean that the music's bad. So there's this like difference between modeling how you understand the world of music through math, and then there's this aesthetic side of it, right? And it's like I think a lot of people will, with good intentions, be like, oh yeah, no, the best music is the music that's mathematically perfect. Right. And that's not necessarily the case all the time, right?
Yep. And I really like that you went back to the Greeks, but not as a point of, so therefore they're right and everything is right, pointing out that even in ancient Greek times, there was contention and there was disagreement. There was conversation about this, where it's just, I feel like a lot of people point to Pythagoras and they go, he figured it out way back then.
Yeah, and it's true. Like Pythagoras tuned mostly with constant intervals. So octaves, fourths, and fifths is what he used, and you can basically create 3-limit tuning. Okay. 3-limit just intonation is Pythagorean tuning, and you can create all of that using just 3 intervals. But there's a lot more theorists than just Pythagoras at the time. You have people like Archytas of Tarentum, who's much more of like an ethnomusicologist, what we would consider in modern day. Whereas he didn't come up with a model and then applied it to music. He went out to see what actual musicians were doing on the streets, what the lived experience of those musicians were, and then went back and tried to create a mathematical model which represented what was happening in lived practice to a high degree. So he tuned with what were called diaphona intervals, so dissonant intervals, which were based off of like the 7th harmonic, which it's maybe we could play. I could send you like a sound example. We could kind of play it, but it's a lot more dissonant. So that consequently, the scales that he created were full of microtones that were dissonant, but dissonance isn't bad.
Right. Totally.
Like our musical system is based off of
I like metal.
Dissonance and consonance, right? It's push and pull, it's tension, and then it's release. And so there was, even at the time, there was a lot of disagreement on how music should be thought of, how it should be performed, and then how we should model it with music theory.
I love that. And I think that can expand, just that way of thinking, like even zooming out further, could expand to all of aesthetics and all of just like the creative arts. As like, what are you trying to present? Like there's the Wes Anderson style of movie, with the symmetry. There are all of these different ways and they can all be emotionally impactful and enjoyable. But mandating only one way is so limiting. And like, imagine if every movie looked like Wes Anderson. That would be bizarre. But in the same way that I like that you're talking about the Greeks, because one of my favorite things was Herodotus's history. One of the things that when he went out talking to people, he found, the Ethiopian gods look like Ethiopians, and the Greek gods look like Greeks. And he started to piece all of this together, and it's kind of undeniable information out there of like comparative cultural practice reflecting truth more than just trying to do it from like the armchair or the mathematics notebook.
Yeah, 100%.
I like how these things in music can point to other kind of threads to pull, regardless of what you're doing or what. If you're just creating, I think music is just such a good analog.
Sure, yeah. And if we're sticking again to the roots in music, which is like this idea that music is part of the key to living an ethical life,
Yeah.
and kind of having that mindset, which is that like not it's not just music and ethics, it's music and ethics, and it's politics, and it's diet, and it's exercise. Everything is interconnected and can be understood through each other. You know, you have like people looking at the idea of the harmony of the spheres, which is to take the difference, the distance between different celestial bodies. So like for the distance from Earth to Mars represents like a, you know, I forget the exact number, but I think it's like a 3-to-2
Cool.
ratio. And then
Awesome.
you can kind of do this and pretend like there's an imaginary string between the Earth and all of the heavenly bodies, and then think of the universe as a set of concordant and discordant music, you know,
Yeah.
playing and winding. And it doesn't mean that they, you know, necessarily literally believe this. You know, maybe in some cases that's the case, but it's a good framework of understanding to kind of live your life through. Is I think the thing to pull from there, and I think it's really interesting for sure.
I do too.
I heard somewhere that Pythagoras would prescribe melodies as if they were medicine. So if you were feeling sad about something, you would wake up and sing these melodies to yourself. And you know,
That's nice.
it's an interesting way to think about and look about, you know, life, I think.
I do too. And I also think this is an interesting moment for creatives, or really just for humans, when we have things like AI and you're trying to figure out, like, where do I fit in? Where's my job at the end of all of this? Like, what is it going to do versus what am I going to do? And I think it could provide a really interesting mirror as to what our value actually is.
Mm.
Like, is our value sending emails, or is our value holding every email we've ever sent in our life in the same brain as memory, as fuzzy memory? And then you think about, like, yeah, the music that you were listening to on the drive to work influences the creative idea that changes your company. You're like, without maybe even you knowing it, but the embodied self, the embodied wisdom, the strange tangents and things that we can inhabit that an artificial intelligence simply couldn't. And it never will, because it doesn't have a physical body. And even if it does have a robotic body, it's not going to have the same kind of tactile experience of the world. But all those things, I think, add up to be like, okay, this is what my creative value actually is. It's not that I know how to use Pro Tools. It's not even that I know how to play an instrument. It's like it's something else. And trying to identify that and like water it and nurture it, I think, is a really like important practice, especially now that we're confronted by this like crazy economic reality of, I don't know, whatever we're living in now.
Yeah, for sure. It's crazy. There's I like that idea that you hit on first, which is like that you know, like everything kind of influences everything. And it's you know, it's something to consider, especially like I don't know, I do a lot of brain rot scrolling.
Yeah, totally.
I just kind of going through, and then it's like to take a step back and it's like, what does this do? You know,
Yeah.
other than the hour I am wasting just sitting there like a potato, just going through something that doesn't positively impact my life in any way. Other than that, like what's this doing downstream of, you know, in terms of my creative output? When I sit down, you know, later and I grab my bass, and you know, like. How inspired am I going to be, you know, versus if I don't know, I went out and gardened. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What's your opinion on like the ethics of AI as musicians?
Yeah, like usage
Yeah,
and
yeah.
copyrighted work and all that kind of stuff. It's this is going to be a cop out answer. I just don't think it's interesting enough for it to really matter. Like I think really the ethics is if you're using it in a way that creates ethical concerns, the music probably just is irrelevant.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
It's so derivative. If you use it in an interesting way, like say, for example, you have a notebook that you have 1,000 different song titles and you want the AI to like pick one today or like combine them in some interesting way or like something that you are putting work into a database or somebody, a series of people that you know, or you want it to like crawl Reddit and find some interesting topics that you can dive deep on, and then you have it research it and then you comb through it and find some interesting song titles or lyrics or like maybe they watch one of your YouTube videos and they say, hey, AI, teach me more about this subject, and then like let me put it into song, or like how should I resolve this weird chord that I really like all of that I think is perfectly reasonable and not unethical. It's just like using it as another tool.
Mhm.
But like being like, hey, like, write the verse, um it's just gonna suck, and it always sucks, and it might always suck. But like using it in the right way, that's what changes it from slop to a tool.
Sure. Yeah. I think there's a
Yeah.
lot of stigma around using it as a tool in an interesting way.
Yeah.
I'll give an example. Like years, I think, maybe not years, maybe like 2 years before ChatGPT. I'm sure it existed, but before I was aware of it, before
Yeah,
the world was aware of it,
all of us. Yeah.
I had this crazy idea to take a murmuration, which is like those. You ever see those geometric flock patterns that some birds do?
Yeah. Yes.
So you can model that pretty effectively using just a few different rules in terms of coding. It's called Boyd's algorithm, and this has existed for a long time.
Okay.
And I thought, wouldn't it be cool is like to take kind of like maybe these three different inputs that affect how birds fly around and create this wonderful geometry and map it to musical parameters and assign different musical parameters to it. So it'd be like there's like a murmuration controlled delay. Every time a bird turns, it activates like a some effect that is controlled by a delay. And so I had this crazy synthesized bird flock pattern, which was controlling my delay. It was controlling the melody trajectory and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, oh, this is this make a fun video. Maybe one day I turn it into some sort of plugin or something.
Yeah.
And so I had this idea, and I put it out as a video and kind of like tied it to the work of Olivier Messiaen, who's a composer. He would transcribe bird song and then use it in his compositions. And I was really obsessed with that. And I put it out, and I titled the video something like like artificially intelligent birds, or I can't remember what it was. There's something. Doesn't really matter. I used the word artificially intelligent in there. I kind of just forgot about it for a while, and then ChatGPT came out, and then all of the ethical concerns that everyone had like dropped like a ton of bricks, and it made me feel so sour about the whole thing. And it's like I don't like that. My fellow musicians, myself included, are getting our music is being scraped, like without our consent and without our pay, being used to generate this stuff. Like that is so wrong on so many levels. And because of that, I privated that video just because I was so sour about it. And like thinking about it, it's like I think that's like a legitimate okay use.
Yeah.
Using these kind of tools in a somewhat creative way, but I don't want to do that again because there's so much stigma on it where I'm like I just want to stay as far away from any AI tool as humanly possible.
Yeah.
This is on the humanly.
Yeah. Yeah, and but I worry about that though because so I almost feel like there needs to be the divide between the like Suno kind of world of it trained on all of our music versus the like mathematics of machine learning. Like that is just stochastic gradient descent and really interesting uses of like some pretty simple math, but with a lot of it. That could make the next cool synthesizer or instrument, or like maybe that turns into like a really sick guitar pedal that everybody wants for their delay and or chorus. Like I want to talk about your video in the context of all of this. But I worry about shutting off like the tributaries of creativity because there is a use case that is like obviously and universally negative.
I think that requires maybe a lot of folks to give some more grace and to say wait, am I going to just immediately comment AI slop, or am I going to take a second and be like, wait, is this actually AI slop? Yes, AI slop. Or actually this is kind of cool and it's not unethically scraping people's data, and it's done in the right way, and maybe that can be cool. I unfortunately I feel like I haven't seen too much of that, and I've seen everything I see is the Suno stuff, and I'm like, maybe we need a lot of space, a lot of grace, and 10 years, and then we might get there,
Probably. And a lot of courage too. I think like it's gonna be hard because that's the prevailing wisdom and it's mostly right. To be able to say like, hey, yeah, this is using the same basic idea of the technology, but it's not that technology. That's really hard to do. And I feel like you could probably find, it's not exactly coming to my head right now, but I bet there are examples of, even like Bob Dylan playing electric guitar for the first time. Like there are probably examples of technology disrupting or being scary or maybe being implemented really poorly in the beginning that ends up being cool. Like maybe even auto-tune in like the mid 2000s or something like that versus hyperpop and the cool applications. I don't know. Maybe there's something there, but it's a weird time. And I agree with you that probably the first step is to be introspective and look at the human side and grow that, and then you can augment it with technology or push it with technology rather than replace it with technology.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm with you there.
Sorry to interrupt this very important broadcast. What I'm asking for is for you to rate it 5 stars, share it with your friends. This is like the most important thing for this podcast to grow. So if you want to do this, you go onto the podcast screen, right? You click on the ... on Spotify. Under there, it says rate show, and you go and you click it. 5 stars. If you could do that for me, that's the best way for the algorithms and all that stuff to share it out with the world. I know that it's a lot to ask, but if you could please just hit those 3 dots and then a 5 star, it would really help us out and helps us, get the word out and spread the love of music. So thank you. If you're listening on YouTube, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Thank you so much. And here's the rest of the episode. So I want to talk more about microtonality. So we talked about the octave, we talked about the history, we talked about the discussion. How do you propose, slicing and dicing? Why were you saying 31? Why do you come up with that number? As somebody that is a pretty novice I'm curious.
Yeah.
Take me over the mountain.
Sure.
Convert me.
So every tuning system on the planet, any way you slice and dice it, is going to be a compromise of some time. 12-tone equal temperament within itself is a compromise for just intonation. It allows us to do multiple key changes and still be in tune. It avoids an interval called the wolf interval. So you might have heard of wolf.
I don't think. Tell me more about the wolf.
The wolf.
Pause of the wolf.
It's essentially a consequence of just intonation. So if we go back to Pythagoras, if we're stacking true, genuine, perfect fifths, you get something that sounds absolutely perfect in one key. So like if you're in C major, it's going to sound great. But what happens is that when you switch to other keys, because of how that harmonic relationships exist, it creates some intervals which sound very, very squirrely. And personally, I love the wolf fifth. I love how it sounds. But historically speaking, we've always wanted to temper out the wolf. And so tempering essentially fixes the little bit of errors that are created when you make a justly intonated perfect system. And I won't bore you with the math, but essentially 12-tone equal temperament kind of spreads everything out so it's very equal so that we have the capacity to play in any key whatsoever. So that is really good in terms of like practicality, is I can sit down with you and be like, I can call something in G minor and then I can call something in like D flat or whatever. And we're not going to have any problems. So that's great. That's fantastic. But that comes at the expense of having some super really in tune intervals, right? Which is part of what 31 fixes. 31 doesn't make your intervals justly intonated, but it gets it so damn close that you get the feeling of them being justly intonated. In addition to that, it gives you new intervals, right? A lot more new intervals. And the way I like to explain this, and maybe we can put in some examples here, is that we have in 12-tone equal temperament, we have our minor chords, we have our major chords. Those are, we have a bunch of other chords, but those are our basic bread and butter. With 31, we get 3 new flavors. We get subminor, which means that your minor third can be a little bit flat of your minor chord, and it's a lot more darker kind of feeling. You have your super major chords, which means if you take your major chord and you take your third and you bump it up a little bit, that's your super major tonality. So you have your root, super major, third, fifth, that's going to be a super major chord. And then finally, we have our neutral chord. So that's going to be perfectly in between a major and a minor. So we have 3 absolutely new cool chord qualities to compose with and to create with. So it's like different shade. I like to think of it as different shadings of the chords. So it kind of lets us expand and contract the harmonies that we are used to hearing. So a lot of this stuff in 31, I think of as an extension of 12, because you can actually model 12 within 31. I can have a diatonic scale that's going to sound completely familiar to you, and it's in 31, and you might not even notice that it's in 31. Cool. That's the really attractive part for me, is that like I've been spending almost all of my life playing in instruments in 12. So it's really great way to like kind of dip your toe in the water, but not like go head first. You can do all this kind of stuff. Now 31, you might say like, why specifically 31? Why not like, if it's all about having different shadings in between there, why not go like to 53, which is like the Turkish tuning system is based off of 53 notes, or, like why not go crazy? I saw someone doing something in 144 Ito the other day, and I'm like, oh my God, your piano would be miles long before you get through.
Playing this on a violin, you're like, ugh.
Right, yeah, and it's at that point you're like at the continuum, and it's like just grab a fretless, dude, just grab a fretless. So 31 is also a compromise, as all tuning systems are, but I believe it's a compromise that gives you more notes to be interesting and expressive in new ways, but not too many notes that it's like, what's the point, or that's too scary.
Yep.
I don't want to learn how to play giant steps in all 144 keys. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Very cool.
So that's basically the reason why 31 is good. And so like once we've established that's what we're going to be working in, then it's time to like really dive into the bread and butter. And that's basically been my mission for the last like 2 years. Is there is historical precedent for 31 being used in the Renaissance period. There is a composer named Vincentino who actually built an organ. I believe it's called the Archicembalo. Probably butchering the pronunciation. It's actually a 31 tuned keyboard.
Wow.
And right, and so he had some madrigals and some other pieces written for it. So there's actually historical precedent for it, as well as a couple other composers. So that's neat to kind of like, we have a canon, a very, very small canon, but a canon nonetheless that we can kind of rest on and stand on to innovate further. Beyond that, there's not a whole lot of innovation in terms of music theory in 31. There's a lot of things that happen which don't have concrete names that everyone agrees on, like we have in 12 Tet. Basically, we have what we have, and it's a consequence of a lot of history and a lot of theorists butting their heads and a lot of common practice and a lot of like, okay, we're here because of everything that happened before, and it's pretty standardized across the board. There's not a whole lot of standardization in 31. So that's kind of what I've been working on, is to kind of come up with terms which describe some of the things that tends to happen in 31 compositions, which might be a good time to move us into the chorus effect.
Absolutely. I do. I think before we get to the chorus effect, though, I want to throw something at you just to see how you respond. Mm-hmm. What about the harmonic series as a bass player? Mm-hmm. You play a low note. There's a series of different notes that naturally appear above them. How does that integrate, or like does it justify 31 more? Does it justify 12 tone more, or is it completely irrelevant? How does that factor into this conversation of?
Yeah, so that's I would say that's like a more higher level meta discussion. Okay. Generally speaking, I tend to not go too much into that.
Yeah.
But if you talk about the harmonic series, the seventh harmonic is really where 12 tone kind of breaks, and we're not able to really reproduce that sound because it's basically a quarter tone off. 31 will be able to approximate that seventh harmonic better. Like we have harmonic seventh chords in 31 that we can't do in 12. And that's the other really cool thing, particularly in a jazz context, is like we don't just open up with brand new, sub minor, super major, and neutral chords. We also have different seventh extensions that we can do, and different ninth extensions, different, all these different things. Is like, well, we've got options, to kind of subtly move our extensions in one way or the other, which is really cool because you can get into some really cool voice leading stuff and micro voice leading within that. So we can, in terms of like justifying it through the harmonic series, we can get closer in 31 to being able to produce more like pure sounding, justly intonated harmonic series based chords. Of course, as you keep going up, it falls apart a little bit. And eventually you get to the point where it's like, okay, well, this can't handle it. Let's go to like 99 Ito. Let's go to Ito, by the way, is equally distance octave. It's another word for tet, or tone equal temperament. A lot of microtonalists use it. I don't know why there's a very subtle distinction, but they basically mean the same thing. So I always like to use Ito, and but a lot of people are like, what's Ito? I've never heard of that. It's just equally distant octave.
Yeah, cool. Thanks.
So you could keep going higher and higher and higher. Eventually you get to the continuum and it's like, well, you might as well just use just intonation at that point.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I don't think about that too much as a composer and as a musician. That like never. When I sit down in the studio, I'm not thinking about that, right?
Yeah.
I'm thinking about like, oh God, I got to catch. I got to catch this figure. I'm usually playing it fretless, so it's like be in tune. That's more of my concern when I'm actually going and producing this stuff.
Absolutely. I find that really interesting because I don't think about it much as a player, but I do think about it as a recording engineer, like mix engineer, because I'm constantly working with harmonics and like second order and third order primarily, so like mostly in tune. But I'm also do some stuff in Melodyne where you can go in and you can edit the harmonic series, and I do that for like a lot of like weird spatial effects and stuff like that, where you can carve out and you can do comb frequencies. Or like if you wanted that seventh order harmonics, you could pump that and lower the other harmonics. Then it like does weird stuff to human voice and stringed instruments and flutes in particular, because they have such like a rich, weird harmonic series, and those harmonics are high enough that you can create all sorts of weird things, especially if you're just like a transition or whatever.
Sure,
That's when I reach into that weird bag.
I think it's also like when you realize, everyone goes through their microtonal journey and they realize like, oh, the loudness and the peaks and the valleys of the harmonic series is what affects and is directly linked to the timbre of a given instrument, right?
Right.
It's like each instrument will have their own kind of like photograph, like sonic photograph of like, oh, this is generally, we have like a very quiet fundamental here and a very loud second, order harmonic or whatever here. And that defines this instrument. So to go in and mess with it, it changes the instrument in some really weird ways. And there's a guy named Bill Cetheris who did a lot of study into this area. And then he kind of came up with these different ideas of dissonance curves and whatnot. He invented this instrument called the hyper piano, which the strings are segmented cuts of different strings, and he set them together in a way that like maximizes their like harmonic potential basically as a piano. And so it's very, very interesting sound and really cool. I didn't know you could do that in Melodyne. I don't have Melodyne.
Cool. Yeah,
so
it's cool. It's worth it.
I'm going to have to get it. I'm super interested in that.
Yeah, I got to that place because I got Melodyne for Formant shifting, which is like the shape of the mouth for like weird monster effects and stuff like that. And then I saw this little tab at the bottom. I was like, what does that do? And it's so cool to be able to basically turn your voice into a synthesizer without using the normal like voice to MIDI, voice to synth tools. It is purely just manipulating the harmonic series that already exists in your voice and then transforming it into a flute or flute-like instrument or some weird special effect.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's cool. Definitely recommend that one. So let's talk about that chorus.
Yeah, for sure. So the idea for the video was essentially I was really interested in the chorus pedal, and specifically I was looking at this Boss chorus pedal, the CE2, which is kind of like where it mostly all started. I think there was a few different circuits, and they were based off of Leslie's before that. But it's it's got this really cool iconic sound, and I was wondering like, since chorus is mostly, I know it's not all, but mostly it's just about duplicating the signal and then kind of modulating it with like an LFO or something, so that its pitch has been changed slightly. So what you're hearing is kind of like a fatter sound that's created by taking the original signal and then copying it, pasting it, and then pitch shifting it slightly, right? I was thinking like it's pitch shifted subtly enough that like you're not going past 100 cents, and 100 cents in 12-tone equal temperament is going to be your semitone. It's more like going into the 30, 20 cent value, and that you can obviously change that with one of the knobs. And so because I noticed that, I was like, wait a minute, could I replicate a chorus effect using 31-tone equal temperament? Right, and this goes back to also gamelan. Balinese gamelan is the term that's usually described to reference their percussive ensemble is shimmer, right? And so the traditional word is ombak, which describes a practice where you take two pairings of instruments that they would have and detuning one slightly so they get this beating effect where you're tuned so close, but it's kind of got this wah 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 wobbly effect, which is really nice. If you ask someone who listens to this music regularly, so an Indonesian native, they'll describe it as kind of like the life force of the ensemble. Cool. And and tones that don't have this wobble, this natural chorus effect, are usually considered to be dull and lifeless. Is usually how they're described. So it's this really interesting kind of like perspective on something we would consider in the West to be like, oh, that might be a little out of tune. It's like, oh no, it needs to be like that. Otherwise, the music, it doesn't sing, right? And so this is where I got the term shimmer, and I used it for shimmer chords to describe replicating what's happening in a chorus pedal with 31 tone equal temperament. So if you take the smallest step of 31, it's called the diesis. It's I think it's about 38, 39 cents. It gives you this shimmer effect. And so essentially what shimmer chords are is taking a 3-note triad, whatever it is, and then adding a shimmer tone, this diesis, either on, on any of your chord tones. So you can do it on your root, on your third, or on your fifth. You could shimmer up, which would be called like shimmering a rising diesis. You could shimmer down, so shimmering a falling diesis. And you can do this in any number of patterns and ways. So essentially what happens is you get 6 different fundamental ways to shimmer a chord. So right there, just by trying to model something that we see in real life, taking an effect which might exist to model something like gamelan, and then we're trying to model technology itself through acoustic synthesis and through acoustic means. So that's the basic idea of what we're doing with shimmer chords in the chorus video.
That's so cool. I love that idea too. And for the listeners that might be like, "Whoa, that's out of my depth," I feel like you could just picture blur or like Gaussian blur or something like that, like blurring the edges, because that's what it like feels like to me. Just when you're describing it, and watch the video as well, is like that feeling of like chorus kind of gives you like a double image sort of sense to the music. I use it a ton on my guitar, and it's a great tool for headphones, because you're able to determine how separate each ear feels. Like the width of a signal using pitch is really impactful. I was in the studio with Alan Parsons once, like my Coalesce session, and he had me play my guitar sharp 10 cents in one ear and flat 10 cents in the other. And he said, in the middle, it'll sound like it's in tune.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I was thinking of that so you could, because that was his version of like, 60s,
Sure.
70s chorus. You could do the same thing though, in some really interesting ways, if you are not only thinking about those shimmer tones in terms of like being within an individual bundle of instruments, but in terms of like stereo picture placement. I can even see like a weird sensation, because like you're saying, these are tools, where if you put those shimmer tones on one part of your head and it led into another section or something like that, maybe it could create a really dynamic headphone listening experience. Just through pitch, without like effects, just pitch itself.
Absolutely. And it's worth mentioning that I feel like it's a distinct effect separate from chorus. Because cool. Most choruses do other things, right? It's because you're also delaying the time in which the note is being delivered, which shimmer doesn't do. So the cool thing I think about shimmer in this whole concept is that a chorus kind of applies an effect indiscriminately to an object. So if you're playing your guitar, you hit the chorus pedal, no matter what you play, every bit of the chord is going to be shimmered in the same way through that chorus effect.
Yes.
So by approaching it from like the music theory lens of like, let's see if we can model this within a 31 tone equal temperament with microtonality, what happens is you embed the effect within the composition tool itself. Treat the shimmer tone as its own independent voice, which can move in various ways, and then I can affect just part of the object if I want to, or the whole thing, and then I can, like you say, you can move it around if you want to do that. Yeah. There was one part of the composition of that video, which I didn't talk about, but it's something I was messing with. Umbra verb, which is umbra is in reference to a shadow, which is in a similar way that we do this, we can you can play a series of notes. You can have like a quarter note thing, and then apply the shimmer tone offset, just like an eighth note or something, or another quarter tone. What it kind of does is it creates a almost like a pitched reverb delay if you do it right. And so it's all about just taking these tools and then like creatively using them in ways that like are unfamiliar, but also are familiar, just found through different means. And you can find I think a lot of beauty in doing that. Certainly a lot of curiosity, for sure.
Absolutely. No, it's fun. You're opening doors, and because like music is fundamentally not a lot of things. It's like you have frequency, you have time, dynamics, how loud you're playing it. It's like, do stuff with that. And luckily, there's a lot you can do with that. But opening up more on the frequency side, because we got a lot of like effects, we got a lot of time-based effects, we got a lot of dynamic instruments and microphones that can pick up dynamics in really great ways now. It's nice to be thinking about like, hey, maybe there are innovations left. Maybe there are new doors to open. That's fun.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, there's really not a lot of continuity when it comes to like 31 theory. It's not something that's been set in stone. It's something that a lot of folks are actively working on. And 31 is just a very small subset in the vast landscape of different microtonal tunings. Like maybe you could be the person who figures out 85 tone equal temperament or something.
Totally.
I genuinely feel like each one has its own, personality, has its own sound and its own, utility for people to mess around with.
Yeah, this is really exciting. I want to turn now to implementation and like how to actually compose with this. This is exciting for me. I'm a pop musician who loves like super symmetric scales and still in 12 tone, but like the octatonic, like stack diminish. But the reason why I like it so much is I don't compose entirely in it, but I can use that as a like weird bag or like I'm in space now kind of trick, or like the same thing with the harmonic series and Melodyne. Like all of those are like just a lever that I can pull when I want to throw in like a dash of cayenne. And so now I'm starting to think of like, okay, 31, that could be a really interesting way that maybe the entire piece isn't quote unquote microtonal, but it can borrow from some of these techniques to like have a final chorus that makes it go like, wow, why did that last chorus hit so hard or feel so different? Or if you have a turn in a second verse that has got a really personal, emotional feel, maybe you do some of those falling tones. Or what was the one called where the super minor?
Subminor. Subminor, yeah.
Like maybe minor's not enough. You need to, this one goes to 11 kind of energy. How do you actually go about doing this? Do you have to have specialized instruments? Are you doing this with certain synthesizer tools, a different type of like MIDI piano roll? Like how are you going about actually making compositions?
Yeah, so this is, I would say like the biggest barrier to entry into microtonality is actually not the theory or anything. It's the physical implementation.
Totally. That's
right?
my biggest barrier.
Like instrument manufacturers have been making stuff in 12 for so long that at first it seems a little daunting to get into and to actually implement in a way that's practical. And I'm all about like, there's no point in doing anything. Any of this music theory if you can't actually practically implement it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm a big believer in that music theory is a lot of things, but first and foremost, I think it's a way to describe actual practice, right? It's descriptive, it's not prescriptive. So we hear a cool sound, we need a cool way to actually like describe it, but the playing must come first, right?
Yeah.
A couple different things. I play mostly a fretless bass. Fretless instruments are going to help you a lot. If you're a guitarist, they also have, let me see if I have it here. It's called fretlets. So you can get these little things and they're tiny little baby frets.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you can just tape this onto your bass or onto your guitar.
Yeah.
Give me 1 second.
Sweet.
So this would be a bass that has some of those on there.
Yes. I see.
Yeah. So those I just glued on there because I know they're going to be permanent. This is kind of just a cheap little acoustic ukulele bass. This is also an option. This is a fully microtonal micro fret bass that you can I can move all of these in any direction to get any kind of tuning I want. I can pop them out. There's you can get some that to pop in there that are straight metal bars, which turn it fretless for just a small period of the actual bass. Cool. And this is like something that's just the neck, fully installable.
Just the neck, yeah. That's great because bolt on neck is like a perfect use case for that.
Absolutely. And then of course, like good old, this is what I'm using most of the time.
Yeah, cool.
Just a fretless bass. And it's funny because like most people will sit there practicing with a metronome. I should be as well, but in honesty, I practice with a tuner.
Yes, that's so cool. That's awesome.
So you can do that in terms of basses. In terms of pianos, you can fully micro tune a piano as well if you know how to do that. I'm a trained piano tuner. Did that for a lot of years. So maybe I say it's, like you can do it, but maybe you want to call your piano technician
Okay.
to
Yeah.
actually get it done to do it right.
Fair enough.
I also do fretless instruments like this guy over here.
Hmm.
This is, it can be a violin, but this is a par dessus de viol. It's an old Renaissance instrument.
Cool. I love period Renaissance performances. That is like one
Yeah,
of my like fun
yeah,
facts.
yeah. And they're not going to be in if they're done right, they're not done in 12. I'll tell you that.
Cool.
So you have those options. Most other instruments are going to be able to microtune in some way, shape, or form. Vocals, obviously, you can microtune. In terms of like DAWs,
Yeah.
I use Logic. I've heard that Reaper gives you a fully editable piano roll, so you can actually construct a microtonal piano roll in Reaper. I
Cool.
haven't tried it,
Yeah.
so I've been told that I'm not 100% sure how it works or how good it is.
Yeah.
But I find that just using a piano roll on Logic, just one that's stuck to 12, it works pretty okay. It could definitely be a lot more streamlined, but
Mhm.
once you kind of get used to it and kind of get used to working with it, it seems to do all right for me.
So like, are you doing the piano roll and then you're like clicking on a note and making it sharp or flat or something? Is that like basically how?
No, it's
Yeah.
I'll load in microtonal tunings. So you
Got
can
it.
do this on like contact players.
Yeah. Cool.
Almost every contact instrument's going to have like an
Oh,
editable tab. You can either input a script for whatever tuning system you want,
sure.
or it'll allow you to kind of change the tuning on like a micro tuning page.
Okay.
There's some I use a lot of plugins which accept Scala files. So Scala is going to be your tuning files, and you can create those, like with a free web player. I think it's called Scale Workshop. You just can, punch in the cent values or the harmonic ratios you want, export it, and just drop it in, and then boom, your synth is in, whatever microtonal tuning system you want.
Cool.
I use a lot of subsets. So for 31, it can still be a lot to deal with,
Totally.
31, and then you have another octave. So
Right.
what I do is subsets, which is just selecting different notes from the larger tuning system, putting them into its own file, and then using them kind of like a diatonic approach.
Cool.
So I would say like all of those things kind of coalesce
Uh-huh.
into how I make music.
I love it. I love it. It sounds like it definitely makes music more of an organizational problem of you have so much more putty. It's like yeah, thinking the way that you do and then also being able to apply that technologically definitely seems like kind of like two very separate challenges but both requirements.
For sure. It's definitely like I like to get a good blend of working in the DAW,
Yeah.
working on a piano roll, and then also like having something physical in my hand
Yes. Yes.
that I can actually play, and that I can actually engage with the music in like in a more deep and meaningful way.
Mhm.
I would love to have just like a whole a band at my beck and call that
Uh-huh.
like, all right guys, we're gonna play this tuning system, but it's like it takes a while, especially if you're on fretless. It takes a while to get used to a 31 note tuning system, and to like you're not like this. You're like you're a lot closer together with a lot of the notes. So it takes time to internalize that and to really be able to play effectively in that tuning system. And because of that, the barrier of entry is a little bit, it's harder to get for a physical instrument. But once you get over that hump,
Mhm.
it is as smooth as playing in 12.
Cool. How does that work in terms of ensemble work? Like, are you having to make more decisions off of it? Like, how I'm trying to picture like a jazz instrument, like, improvisational setup in 31.
Yeah. So for the most part, I've been doing everything myself. When it comes
Yeah,
to
yeah.
when it comes to 31,
Yeah.
I genuinely don't have a lot of experience, because again, I kind of live out in the middle of nowhere. There's not if I want to play with someone in 31, I'm gonna have to spend a little while teaching them how to play in 31.
Yeah, totally. I'm just
Uh,
curious, like conceptually, how do you think that would work? I
how-
totally understand that it makes sense as a solo composer performer. That makes total sense of like you can you can go rabbit hole as far as you want to go. But yeah, I'm curious, even if it was just with one other player. Yeah.
Yeah. So I do occasionally bring in singers.
Cool. Yeah. Okay.
For my videos and stuff, and I find that singers can adapt extremely quickly. Because I'd say like when I'm singing, I'm not thinking. I'm not looking down at a piano. When I play piano, I'm sitting down and I'm playing, and by looking down at the keys, I'm reinforcing this idea of 12. Same thing when I'm playing a fretted guitar or a fretted bass. I'm kind of reinforcing this idea of 12. I don't have that conception at all when I'm singing, right? And I'm not a very great singer, but I don't really think about that. I'm going purely off ear, purely off muscle memory. And so when I bring in singers, I tend to find that they can latch onto the microtonal sounds a lot quicker than other instrumentalists, and that might be because of that. I'm not exactly sure, but usually what it involves is before they get into the studio, I send them a track of like what it's supposed to sound like. So like a guide track of like like some sort of MIDI or something, doing the singing part and being like, it's some very interesting intonation. Microtonality scares a lot of people, so sometimes I won't even mention that it's microtonal. It's just like, hey, we're doing a cool project, and these are the notes you need to sing.
Right.
And then people are like, oh, okay, and then suddenly they can sing it really well. But I find a lot of times you're going to be you bring them in, we're going to be like, okay, we're working in Orwell 9. I'm going to need you to hit this, super sub minor, whatever the heck, and they're like, and then they can't do it. And it's like you also have to step back and be like, okay, I'm a producer in this role, so it's my job to make them feel comfortable enough so that they can give their best performance.
Yeah.
And so that's a lot of like the how it works in studio is like I'm not theory heavy at all. I kind of throw it under, and then it's more of like, oh, can you hit this but just a little bit sharper, that kind of stuff. So it's a lot more like that. With singers, haven't really collaborated with too many people who play fretless instruments. I've collaborated with a couple people who play Lumitone, done virtual collaborations, which is like this huge hexagonal microtonal keyboard. Yes. But often when I'm playing with people, like who do Lumitone stuff, I'm the one who's like lacking on the theory. I'm like they understand this way better than I do. So they take up that burden.
Cool, I love it.
Yeah.
So I've got one last question for you. It's the same question I ask every guest. Why do you love music?
You ask a musician, like, oh, like what are your hobbies outside of work? And then it's always like, what are you talking about? It's just music. It's like, I feel like a lot of musicians, maybe more than any other craft, we live it, we breathe it, we are music. So it's like, why do I love music? It's, I just love being alive. It's really, there's not that much of a difference between who Levi is and what the music I produce is.
Beautifully said. I really like that. I've heard a lot of people answer. I haven't heard that one before. But that is one of the reasons why I like asking it, is because it is so difficult, because it is really like trying to disconnect two fully enmeshed things. The musician and the music.
Has anyone asked you why you love music?
Oh yeah, all the time.
Okay.
I change my answer every time. So
maybe that's the answer. It's fluid. It's
very much.
There's so many different aspects to everything. Is like what if you asked me that a different day, I would have probably had a different answer, right? Because the way we engage with music every day changes a little bit. And it changes a little bit based off of, like what I ate for breakfast, how I treated the cashier at, when I went to the gas station to, grab a drink or whatever. It's going back to the Greeks and the Pythagoras, everything is genuinely connected. And yeah, I think it's really beautiful and great and important, necessary to acknowledge that.
Can't step in the same river twice.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's a crazy thing, and it is a wonderful thing. And maybe my answer today would be, the reason why I love music is I get to talk to such cool people. It just connects. It is such an instant, like, oh, we're both into this. Let's go.
Right. Yeah. It opens it up so that like we can have there's no pretense. We can just jump into it and have something that's real.
So where can people get in touch, watch your videos, listen to your music?
You can look up Levi McClain Music Theory on YouTube. I should know my YouTube handle. I think it's either Levi McClain or Levi McClain Music.
I'll put the link in the bio too.
Thank you, appreciate it. Yeah. Click on the link. You can find me there. You can find me on Instagram. I just put up a song for the first time ever on. It's the song from that video.
Yeah.
It's just a little 1 minute music theory example that like I got like 1,000 comments saying to put it up on Spotify, because I never put up anything, because I'm just like, I'm so busy teaching. I'm like, no, I'm communicating this stuff so you guys can make really cool music with it. But I was beaten down enough to where I'm like, okay, fine.
Love it.
Released it on Spotify, so I guess I have some music on Spotify now.
Fantastic. I'll put it in my playlist. So.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so much for all the time. I loved chatting.
Yeah, it was great meeting you.